Welcome back to Ta-da 3D printing. So I received a new printer. This one is the X Plus 3. The brand name is spelled QIDI, and everything that I had looked up was online, so I wasn't sure how to pronounce it. I was just calling it QIDI in my mind, but I also call the Mark IV the MK4, so I figured that probably was not correct. And sure enough, I did look, and it seems like everybody is pronouncing this QIDI. The Q is pronounced like a CH sound, QIDI. Anyways, the company had contacted me about sending the X Plus 3, and it did appeal to me because it is a Core XY printer, it's completely enclosed, and it's got a large print surface, larger than the Prusa MKs, not quite as large as the XLs, but also it's supposed to have very fast speed, so all of that sounds great. Also, it comes completely assembled. There should be minimal setup. So I'm really excited to see what this printer offers and also see how long it takes to set up. Okay, so to start with, this box is huge and it's also very heavy. I needed help to get it out to my print room and then also onto the tabletop, and then realized that it's going to be a little tricky to get it out of the box. But here we are from the top view. The box did come with these black protectors on all the corners. I was able to get it through the door, however, it was a little bit tight. It's about 25 inches deep by about 25 inches wide and 26 inches tall. It does have built-in handles on both sides though, so that does definitely help with trying to move it around. I liked these black protectors, but they kind of get in the way when I'm opening the box because as I'm cutting along, I'm going to run right into them. So I have to cut those off first, and then I can get into the box. On this side of the box, you can see that it does recommend 2 people carrying this. It says team lift, and you can see a little bit of the handles that are built into the box to help you be able to move it around. So first thing, when you open the box, there is a quick start guide that is printed. There is also a leveling paper and a USB. I set up the view this way because I really expected there to be a lot of small boxes and things on top, but once I remove the packing foam, then it's immediately right into the printer. And I quickly realized that this printer is going to be too heavy for me to lift out, especially at this angle. I already have it on the top of a tabletop, so to try to lift it even further is not going to work. So I decide that because everything has a really good cushion around it, I'm going to go ahead and cut into the box and just cut the side off and see if I can just slide it off. And to have a little bit more leverage, I also cut off the other side. So I've got 2 sides that are just kind of cut open so I can get into and move this printer. I didn't realize until after I've already shifted this around that there are handles on both sides of this printer, and that probably would have helped me be able to scoot it off of the box, but anyways, I got it done. It is packaged really well, lots of layers. Other than that manual and first packet, there's nothing else in the box. Everything is inside the printer itself. So there's more packing foam, and the first box that I'm able to get out does show on the front what's included in it. It's pretty minimal though. It seems like a lot has already been assembled, but there is a power cord, of course that's needed, rubber feet, looks like an Ethernet cord, and a scraper, which makes me a little nervous to be using a metal scraper, but that's interesting. Their branded spool of filament, and then we've got a glue stick, which has very interesting packaging. Cannot read any of this, but it does say glue stick, so that's good. We've got a screwdriver, another hot end. That one's a hardened hot end. It seems like this Allen wrench just kind of shook out of the other packaging. It's just kind of off by itself, but there's additional tools in there as well. And then I wasn't quite sure what this was, but it's actually part of the filament holder for the back. And that's all for this box. And then for their filament, I find it really interesting that they are making their own. This is a half spool and it is PLA in what looks like black. And then on the back of what I thought was just a foam block is actually the filament holder. This is a completely enclosed filament holder, so it'll help with moisture. It does look like it's coming with a desiccant in it, which is kind of gigantic. And then 2 round plastic pieces. I'm not sure if this is part of something needed or if it's just an extra. And you can see on the side there is an opening for where you can put the desiccant, and you can see like little holes along there of how that will work. And then on the back there is instructions on how to put it together. So after both of those are removed, it looks like on the inside there's mainly just foam is all that I'm seeing. Under that is the lid, it looks like, to the entire printer. I can't pull it out through the top, so I pop the door open and I can pop it out from there. There's another piece of foam underneath that slides out easily, and this is the view on the interior of the printer. It looks like the build plate is already attached and everything's kind of zip tied in from this direction. There's a fan, it looks like, on the back and also on the side. But overall it looks very well designed, and the enclosure is just something I'm going to have to get used to. So the next thing in the user guide is to go ahead and plug it in. It looks like the power supply is on the back of the machine, which is not that surprising, but this gives me a chance to kind of look overall at the machine now that everything has been unpackaged. It looks like the power button and cord are on the bottom, the Ethernet as well. And then it looks like the filament is actually going to be on the back of the machine, so there's a little bit of details of how to attach that. So to start, I just plug it in. I'm going to try to go through the instructions as much in order as possible. I do turn it on and then it starts booting up. It did make me a little bit nervous to turn it on and then push the machine back because I felt like maybe the cord would come undone, but it doesn't. It stayed very well. The initial boot up takes about 30 seconds or so, not very long. The next step is to select your language, and I realize that I have a little bit of trouble pushing the button firm enough on this touch screen. I think it's just going to take a little bit of getting used to. So now the next thing, it says take out the top cover. I've already done that. I do like all of the pictures, that helps me a ton. And then remove the zip ties that fix the print head. These zip ties are way sturdier than I was expecting. I try out a couple different sizes of scissors and I cannot get them to work on the right side. And so I end up switching to like the filament clippers. I just feel like I can get a little bit better angle on everything with that. There's 2 zip ties on the right that need to be removed, and then from there it looks like there's just kind of a cardboard box surrounding the hot end. And as I'm removing that, I move the hot end a little bit, and that kind of surprises me that it's not stuck in place. But it's easy to move and it moves really smooth. Although I am very careful to not cut any wires or belts, everything removes very smooth from this top part. This is what it looks like, and I think I got everything so far. Now we can move on to the next step. I need to remove the zip ties inside of the printer. There are 4 of them, and I'm not sure if these end up being thicker or if the tension is different, but I have a hard time not only cutting them, but I have a really hard time removing them. The other zip ties slipped out pretty easily, but these ones feel like they just get caught as I'm pulling them out. I'm able to get one of them on the right side, but the other one just does not want to budge, so I move on to the left side and cut these as well. And it seems like rather than trying to pull from the back, if I pull them through from the front, that works a little bit better. So I cut them again so that I can do that on the left side, and that does work. And finally, I can get the stubborn one on the right side. I click the next button, and the next thing is to remove 4 screws that fix the hotbed. I assumed that the Allen key that was kind of removed and not with the other ones was the correct size, but it was not. So I had to go back into the tool bag and see that there are other Allen keys in there as well. And these ones are bundled up. I'm not sure why that other one was separated. And the largest one in this bundle is the one that works for me. So I remove it from the bundle and I'm able to get these screws to work. I'm really not a fan of these Allen keys that have the hook on them because I feel like they would hit things, but it does work, and I'm able to remove all 4 screws. It feels like it's only connected by just a couple of turns, even though the screws themselves are very long. I click next on the touch screen and it says to take out the packing foam, and the bed starts to move up at this point. I do really like this door, but it's really hard to see what's going on when it's closed. There are 2 more pieces of foam underneath. I get those out and the bed stops moving, so I click next. The next thing is to preheat the hotbed to the filament printing temperature. It says that the leveling will do better with that, so I get it to 60 is what I'm assuming for PLA, and click next. This takes a couple minutes, so I just go through and clean up all of the mess that I've created during that time. I hadn't seen anything about closing the lid on it, so maybe that would have helped with the timing, I'm not sure, but I go ahead and click next. Okay, the next thing it says is that it's going to move the platform and to make sure that it's clean. I was careful when I removed everything, but I'm going to go ahead and spray the print bed with alcohol just to be sure. There was not anything included with the box, so I'm just using something that I already have. The next step, I'm not completely sure what it's doing, but it says please wait, the platform and nozzle are initializing. The nozzle moves back and forth a little bit, and then the print bed moves up. And looking back now, I realize that I went through unboxing and now I'm in calibration 3 of 4. And it's asking for the special paper that came in that first packet for bed leveling. And it feels like it's going to be similar to the XL because the print bed is what moves rather than the nozzle. So I'm going to put this underneath the hot end. And the idea is that you're going to move it until you feel a little bit of friction. And I do start backwards. I do try to go down, and then I realize, no, I need to be going up. There are 4 different, it's not very visible, there's 4 different amounts that you can move it with each press of the button. And the 0.05 is just not working for me off the bat. Doesn't seem like it's moving enough. I check the paper to be sure, and no, it's just completely loose. So instead of that one, I go to 1 and I move it up a lot. And of course that's too much, so I'm gonna have to back it off a little bit. But it is a little easier to see from the camera angle. Where I was standing, it was a little bit trickier to see. But after a little bit of adjustment, I do get it. It still moves, but it almost feels like sandpaper that you can tell that it's really catching the nozzle. So I click the next, and it starts going through this calibration where it's gonna hit, the nozzle's gonna go through, and I'm assuming just basically probe the bed. It goes all the way across the bed and goes through multiple steps. This whole process, it's not telling me exactly how many probe points it's going through, but this whole process takes a little bit under 5 minutes to do. The next step says input shaper running, please wait, and it just calibrates basically to the middle of the bed. The nozzle moves pretty close to the middle and it moves the bed up, and this goes through, and basically after it kind of auto homes, it sits there for a while. It makes a little bit of noise, but it sounds like just the computer's running, and that takes another about 5 minutes. I don't touch anything, but then it says saving and looks like it lowers the bed and tells me that now it's time to attach the filament holder on the back of the machine. It also says to make sure that the filament has been fed all the way through to the extruder. So I have the printer facing me. I need to turn it around again. So the first step is to attach the filament holder, and that is from the box. So I remove that and secure it in this area right here. There are also pictures on the back of the printer to try to kind of help you make sure you know what the next step is. So I get the filament dry box, and this one does have a pretty cool lid on it. I remove out the extra parts, and there is details on the back, but it's kind of tricky to be looking on the back and be doing things on the front. Once I open the desiccant and add that one, that seemed very simple, of course. It fits well, no questions there. I open the filament roll. There's all these beautiful color pictures on the back, so the next thing is to add the filament in. And there is a little space inside where I need to make sure that the filament feeds through. From this angle, it's kind of along the bottom, it looks like, and I'm assuming maybe it's gonna go through this little area here, but it's not very clear from the back of the filament roll. If I'd been going step by step through the quick start guide, I would not have gotten confused. But I'm just starting to go through the filament steps because it looks very in-depth, multiple steps. So I think, okay, I just need to figure out how to get the filament through that little area. But of course, it doesn't need to be tangled. I keep having troubles with the filament popping off and not wanting to stay on the roll, and it's just not quite working right. Even if I can get it to feed through that little area, as soon as I slip the filament down, it pops right back out again. The steps on the back go from opening and putting the desiccant in to just feed the filament into the dry box, and that's gonna work. It doesn't even show closing the lid, and then you can just push it through to the tube. So I could tell that I was missing something. I kept getting caught, it seemed like, on the outside of this enclosure. And as I'm looking at this little thing that's in my way, I realize that there's another picture on the side. Please press and hold the plastic interface first, then take out the plastic plug. Of course, there's a plug in the way. For some reason, I thought that this was something that the Bowden tube was going to slip over, but as I look closer, I don't know why I thought the filament could get through this. Once I finally press down on the correct thing, then it slips right out, and that was the entire problem that I was having. So now I can load the filament through that little area, and it slips through and continues, and I can get enough filament through that I don't have to worry about it tangling when I slip the filament into the enclosure. As always, I'm sure I'm probably the only one that missed that step, but now I can move on. I add the lid, and they do snap in position. It's not something that's going to slide around. You have to get it perfectly aligned. Now I can put the filament enclosure on the back of the printer. You do have to remove the plug, slip that on, and then you can put the plug back. This will help lock it in place, but now that the filament enclosure is secured, I need to go back to the quick start guide because I can't read any more of the steps involved. Now I need to get the Bowden tube and attach it from the filament enclosure to the back of the printer. Once you've inserted the tube, it does lock in place, but you can remove it, of course, by pressing the little tab, but it does keep it secured. And then I'm a little bit lost because there is no motor on the back, and then I'm remembering, okay, the screen told me that I had to push the filament all the way through to the extruder. So I didn't understand that. So I need to remove the lid, pull the filament out, and just turn it and make sure that it's going to load all the way through this Bowden tube. So it's what you see, these two blue cords here, the blue tubes here. Then there's another Bowden tube that feeds on the inside all the way to the extruder. So it is something that as you're feeding it through, you can see the tube move just a little bit, so you do know approximately where the filament is. And I am pushing it through. It's reminding me a lot of loading the Prusa XL, and then I get to where I guess I'm in the extruder and I break it. I break the filament off, and it's just right there. I'm able to pull it out, but it is so frustrating because it's such a long length, and I thought I was doing fine, and then just like out of nowhere, I felt like that filament broke. So I do it again, and I keep a close eye on exactly where I'm at in the tube, and I just make sure that I'm right at the extruder, and I push just very, very gently. But since I have the printer completely flipped, then nothing happens. I don't feel like the printer grabs the filament or anything, so I just put it back in the enclosure, I set it back in, and I close the lid. Now I have to flip the printer back around, and I'm hoping that that power cord stays plugged in because I'm in the middle of the tutorial. I get it flipped back around, and I click next. Okay, so now it wants me to set the nozzle temperature, and it kind of defaults at 220, which bothers me. I want it to be at 215, so I turn it down and it goes to 217 and then 214. So it's jumping in 3 temperature degrees increments, which kind of bothers me. So I set it back at 220, the default, and click next. It says to keep pushing the filament into the filament or run out sensor until it reaches the extruder, which I felt like I'd already done. So I click next. Let's zoom in a little bit more on the hot end. And as I push this button, it will continue to push filament through just a little bit at a time. It seemed like it was going, but I'm not seeing any filament come through. So I go ahead and push that button again. And again, I'm having troubles feeling like, am I actually pushing the button? Am I pushing hard enough? Is it actually doing anything? Because I'm not seeing anything. Then finally, I see a little bit of red filament come through. I assume that that was what they calibrated it with. Of course, I loaded black filament, but there is a little bit of red coming through. So I just keep pushing the button as much as I can figure out how to push the button, and slowly I'm seeing a little bit more red come through. I continue pushing this button for what feels like a million more times, and I do continue to see red filament. I felt like I had the black filament right there, so even though I'm not seeing it shift, I feel like it's close enough. I click next and it says that the guide tutorial is finished. The printer came with a USB. I assume that there's preloaded files on it, so I want to plug that in, but I can't seem to find where it even goes. I'm looking all along the front, next to the screen, all along the side, not seeing anything. So the filament was on the back. Maybe it's on the back too. I flip it around and I don't see any USB slot all along the back, but it's on the top of the back. So this is flipped around. I flip it back around and I can reach it. It's just kind of awkward where it is. Tutorial is finished. Let's see what is on this USB. I do like the screen in general. It looks cool. I like being able to see, some of the stats of the printer. Seems like it's doing an auto homing, so I'm going to add the lid to the top as well. Never saw anything about when to put the lid on. And I see a caution sign when printing TPU and PLA to not use the top. That was really not what I was expecting, but I believe I have PLA, so even though it looks cool to leave it on, it makes me wonder about printing. It kind of makes me think that it'd be nice if it was a hinged top, kind of like the door is hinged. Because if I'm going to be flipping it or taking it off all the time, where am I going to put it? So let's see what's on the USB drive. I want to print something relatively quick, so I first click on the bunny. I do like that it loads all of the information, how long it's going to take, and even shows a preview of what's going to be printed, especially on this drive that I have no idea what's on it. It shows not only the grams of filament used, but also the meters, and then it also says what type of filament it's sliced for. It also has the QIDI logo. This one is about a 12-minute print. This one is just called X Plus 3. I'm not sure if maybe that's another filament holder or plug. Of course, we've got a Benchy, and that one says that it's going to take 17 minutes. That's really fast. I'm not sure what the settings are on that one, but I do really want to see how that one turns out. The next one is a puzzle cube by Wild Rose Builds. And then this one says Yaffic Rounded Plus. I'm not sure what this is. Maybe there's some cubes. It looks like they're hinged, which is kind of cool. So for my first print, I decided that I would go with the logo because it seemed like it would be the quickest. And it's going to be PLA, so I remove the lid. I select the print and get it going. There's a reminder that since I'm printing with PLA, I need to have it fully ventilated, so I still have the lid off, and I'm going to print with the door open, which will probably be okay because then we should be able to see things a little bit better. It does go through a probing process before it begins printing. It looks to me like it's just probing in the area that it's going to be printing. It's not going through the entire bed. And then it continues to heat until it's ready to start printing. The entire time until I click to print until it starts printing is about 3.5 minutes. I leave the room, I had some things to do in the house, and let it continue running, and that was a mistake. I really should have watched the first layer. I don't know why I didn't. And when I come back, I realized that it had not printed at all. There was no filament glob on the floor. There was just nothing that was extruded at all. There's nothing there. I had cleaned the bed, so the little bit of red filament was gone, but I must not have finished extruding enough when I loaded the filament. I must have done something wrong. So I go into the settings and find where basically I can purge the nozzle. I click the little load button and make it so that it will load, not unload, but it will load. It had already cooled down, so I have to reheat the nozzle so that, of course, that it can actually work. This takes about 20 seconds for it to heat up, not too bad. So I click it to load, and the default is just 10 millimeter. I did that a couple times and it just wasn't doing much. So as always, I just go all the way to the highest setting and I adjust it to be 50 millimeters and click it through. It does look like it's loading on the screen as it's going. So at least I know I did click the button. And again, I have to click this several times. I don't feel like I'm getting anywhere, so I decide to unload it. Maybe it just didn't completely load. But that does mean that I have to turn this machine around again. I get that done and I'm able to pull the filament out and then reload it in, and it just feels like it catches better this time. I'm not sure what had happened the first time, but I want to try this again. I get everything snapped in and flip it back around to the front again. And then I get it swapped to load instead of unload, and I have it at the 50 millimeter again. First time doesn't seem to catch. I turn it because I start thinking, well, maybe I need to push it through at the same time that I'm pushing the button, but I push the button one more time and I start to see more red filament. So I just did not have enough. It then changes to black filament, so I feel like I have finally gotten it purged how it needs to be. Okay, I've got this recentered. You can see it's pushed quite a bit of filament through. I think I'm ready to start the print again. It goes through its homing and probing process. I do stick around just to make sure that everything starts correctly this time. And I'm glad that I do because I see just a little bit of ooze from the nozzle that I wipe away. And the print starts and I can see that it is actually printing. It is moving along. You can see the layers starting to build. So I feel safe to leave it and let it finish. Okay, it's wrapped up, so let's see how this print turned out. It does have kind of a textured print bed, so I'll be curious to see how that looks on the print. But it does stay, the print stays pretty attached, pretty decent until I flex it. The purge line is a little weird. It's not a square, it's kind of an L shape, I guess you would say it is. The black color looks really smooth. There's just a tiny bit of string right there at the very top, it looks like. It almost looks a little bit matte of the black, but the edges look very smooth. The layer lines, I think, look great. I don't really see a seam, but you know, it is kind of a funny shape, so it's hard to say. And this is how the first layer turned out, which I think looks really good. I like the texture. It looks really smooth and even. So let's try something else. We got to go with the standard Benchy. This one is saying that it's going to be 17 minutes. So I really want to compare that to the input shaping on the MK4 and just see how it looks. I'm going to leave the sound on the beginning of this print so you can hear everything. One thing that I do notice is the fan sounds very loud on this machine. And it's of course quieter when you close the door and close the lid, but since you're not really supposed to do that for PLA, I'm a little surprised at how loud overall the fan sounds. You do hear a little bit more as the bed is moving. I know that the noise overall can be a big deal for a lot of people, so that's why I wanted you guys to be able to hear and compare overall what you think of it. And you also get an idea of the overall speed of things as it's probing in real time. And then here you can hear the beginning of it starting to print. Sounds like another fan kicks on. It just makes good old printer noises. And then here you can hear it when it's well past the first layer and just at its normal speed. This portion here has not been sped up. It is moving pretty fast. Okay, let's go ahead and speed it up and see how this turned out. The black color looks nice, I think, overall. And it did adhere well to the bed plate, but it does pop off very easily. I actually dropped it. And here it is, the 17-minute Benchy. I don't have a lot of details on what layer height this is. It looks a little bit taller than the one that I've used on other ones. I do see a little bit of a seam right there that's a little bit funny. It didn't seem like it was consistent. There's a couple spots of stringing, but I don't feel like the bridging is bad. The top looks pretty smooth. And I mean, this is pretty bright light, daylight, so you can see with the, when I get the light on it, you can see the quality of it. The bottom looks pretty good with that build plate. I think it looks pretty good. It would work for a lot of scenarios. I do feel like the roof has a little bit of a curve towards the back, but overall it's pretty nice. So my first thoughts on the QIDI X Plus 3 is that it's a really cool printer. I was not expecting to like it as much as I do. I like the print size, I like the overall size of it, I like that it comes with the enclosure and it looks cool. It's kind of futuristic looking. It seems well built and I like that it was already put together. There's a couple things that I don't love about the door. I don't like that it doesn't extend back. I feel like this hangs out quite a bit. And if I'm supposed to keep it open while printing PLA, that's going to be kind of awkward. I'm hoping I'm not going to run into it. And the same for the lid. I don't know how I'm going to work with that I'm going to be printing mostly PLA. I'm going to have this removed. I'll probably just end up setting it on the back so it's not taking any footprint. We'll see if it shakes when it's actually printing. I don't like that the filament holder, the power, everything is on the back because it's very hard to get to. The printer is a little bit loud even when it's sitting idle. It seems like there's a fan or something still running, and so I'm probably going to be turning it off when I'm not using it, and I don't do that with my Prushas. So having to get to that power is going to be a little tricky. I think I'm probably going to end up shifting some things around and putting it on the very far right of my table so that I can get to the back, get to the filament, get to the power easier. It's a little bit inconvenient, but I think it is workable. It does say online that you can use QidiSlicer with this printer, so that's going to be my next step, is see how it compares. I really want to keep with QidiSlicer. I'm used to it, and I want to see how my prints that I'm used to on other printers will work on this one. I really like the enclosure. I want to see how that's going to help with warping, but I'm really not sure how that's going to help me a whole lot if I can't use that with PLA. So I really need to just check into that and try some more prints. I think the price of this printer is very competitive. It looks like the regular price is right around $1,100. It's on sale right now for $6.99. I'm not sure how long that's going to last. But compared to like a Prusa, to have something fully assembled and also have an enclosure and have that large print bed that's larger than the Mark IVs, it looks like the Mark IV with an enclosure right now is about $12.99. And the difference also between the two printers is time frame. The QIDI printer is shipping within 72 hours. You'll get it very quick. And the Prusa, it's, saying right now 3 to 4 weeks. Hard to say on a fully assembled one. So you would just have to decide for your needs. Do you need something immediate? What size do you need? Do you need an enclosure? All of those things are things to factor in. But I am really impressed with this printer, and I am kind of curious. They do have a larger size one that has a print bed of a little over 12 inches. So that is really awesome. I want to check that out as well, because we all know that the Prusa XLs are way back ordered. It's going to take a long time to get another one of those. Let me know your thoughts on this printer, if you would try it out. I will be doing a follow-up one after I've used it a little bit more. Thanks for watching.